Get paid to drive. Start a new career behind the wheel at the EMTA. If you are looking for a high-paying and rewarding career with full benefits and paid training, stop by or apply online today with the EMTA. Plus, EMTA riders can now enjoy free Wi-Fi on new, clean, and environmentally friendly buses to travel all over Erie County. Visit ridethee.com for more information.
Get on board EMTA. Get on board EMTA. Get on board.
Quickfill gasoline is made right here in America. United Refining Company, who operates Quickfill, refines its gasoline from North American crude oil in Warren, Pennsylvania. When you buy United Refining Company gasoline at Quickfill, you keep jobs and businesses in America. And you keep American families strong. You don't need to send your money overseas when you buy gasoline. Buy American-made gasoline at Quickfill. Quickfill, driving America.
Welcome to TalkErie.com's Joel Natalie Show, Erie, Pennsylvania's daily podcast. Every day, we tackle the biggest issues that the Erie PA region faces. Stay informed and involved as we advance the narrative of Erie. Now, here's Joel Natalie.
We are glad to welcome back in studio here the Erie County Coroner Lyell Cook. Lyell, good to see you, sir. Appreciate you jumping on the mic with us here.
Joel, it's always a pleasure to be here.
So,
good to see Shani.
Yeah, absolutely. In a nutshell, people still die every day in Erie, Pennsylvania, right? But the question is if it's a natural death or an unnatural death, right?
Right. That's why I exist.
For the unnatural deaths. Exactly. Do they still do inquests?
Well, not technically. They do in Pittsburgh. Or
do they?
They did.
What is an inquest?
It's a judge in Pennsylvania. A coroner is considered a magistrate because we can. It's a jury trial, and the coroner sits as a judge. The problem is that when you're all done, you get 12 jurors out of the jury pool. That no matter what they come up with, it has no legal bearing on anything. So,
why would they call for an inquest?
Well, historically, that was the way they had to handle it because they didn't have the knowledge.
Gotcha.
Of postmortem changes and that sort of thing, and they hadn't quite dwelt with the coroner working with law enforcement. Mm-hmm. So I think Merle Wood, in the 40 years he was coroner, had 2 inquests.
Oh, really? Wow.
And there were other reasons for that, but
right.
Our investigations are actually considered inquests.
Okay. But
we don't have to call a judge or a jury.
And the technology, I would imagine, is such now.
Oh, yes.
That you're able to make determinations quite quickly.
Right. Because my job is to determine cause and manner of unnatural and unattended deaths. And everything we do, we have to do within a medical or scientific certainty. So that's why we have the good fortune of having a forensic pathologist here to pick up where we leave off. Mm-hmm.
How, when you say unattended deaths, how often is that the case where it's like somebody encounters someone who passes and you have to go in and say, was this a natural or unnatural death, right?
Right. It's when you stop and see your aunt and she's lying dead in bed.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a misnomer.
But is it half of your business, do you think?
No, not quite.
Oh, okay.
Because a lot of them, most of them have comorbidities. They have other conditions, medical conditions that readily explain why the person died in their sleep usually. So we just go in to make sure that there's no evidence of anyone else being involved in the death.
Okay. So just walk me through that. If let's say you encountered someone, you encounter your aunt, and she's obviously not breathing and she's gone, they usually would call an ambulance, call a funeral home, and who calls you, I guess?
Well, the average person will just call 911 because they don't know what else to do.
Right.
So they go out, and then at that point, they're the ones that will call us because they determine very easily. Anyone can pronounce death. You don't have to be any I have a grandson that can do that.
Okay.
Because all you have to do is have the intellectual capability to determine that life has passed. I mean, that sounds really silly, but it doesn't. That's all it takes to determine that somebody is dead. The EMS usually will call us, or sometimes the police, and we'll go out and just make sure that there are no signs of trauma. We look for drugs and alcohol and that kind of thing, and it's really pretty simple, but it's common sense.
When you say that you look for drugs and alcohol, like, again, somebody that's unattended, what are the telltale signs of that?
Well, of course, we look to see how long they've been dead.
Deceased,
based on the postmortem changes. That would be rigor, temperature of the body, and the stiffening and lividity. And that tells us whether the body's been moved after death. That's where the blood settles to the lower portions of the body. And that tells us what position they were in when they died. And a lot of times, if someone's lying prone or on their chest, the paramedics will go in and they roll them over to assess them, but they will tell us that they did that.
Right. So you have to rule that one out. But if they've been moved from a room or something, then that becomes suspicious.
An issue. Yes. And
so right away, there's a possibility that you're jumping into a criminal investigation.
Absolutely, and that's essentially we have to either prove or disprove that there's adequate evidence that it's a criminal case. So, and that includes the drugs, and we look in the garbage cans. That'll tell a whole story. And, and we look around, we check to see how much mail is in the box, things like that, because that gives us an idea how long. It doesn't necessarily mean that's when they died, but it means that they haven't been out there getting their mail. And historically, the postal people would notice that the mail's not coming in and would probably call the police to go over and do a welfare check because something's wrong here. And so there's just all kinds of real simple things that we start off with, but we never know when we arrive exactly what we're going to do. We have to start with a blank slate. And
how many cases, like in a year, do you have to at least investigate?
Well, last year, my deputies, and I'm down to 2 deputies.
You are. I was going to say, is it growing or shrinking?
And one part-time that is off right now. The 3 of us went out on 680 death scenes. Prior to that, the year before was 733. So the numbers, again, have gone down.
So actual...
that's where we show up, and that includes car accidents, suicides, that kind of thing.
Do you think that has something to do with our population loss in Erie County?
It could. It really could. I mean, there's no way for us to scientifically determine that, but
it makes you wonder if we're getting a little younger. I wouldn't think so.
I don't feel any younger.
I'm just saying, the population, could be getting younger even as we're shrinking a little bit. I mean, I don't know.
Years ago,
or people are living longer.
When Hammermill closed up, we started watching very closely because we thought there was going to be an uptick in suicides because these people had worked there not only their whole lives but for generations. Their father and grandfather worked there.
Right.
And suddenly it's gone. And surprisingly, it went the other way. And I have no explanation for that.
Right.
But we did look at that very closely.
You mentioned suicide. We might as well get that number because, again, there's a lot of talk about mental illness and and depression and things. Is it?
Well, last year I'm glad to say that we had 34 suicides in Erie County. Down from 51 the previous year.
Wow.
That's significant.
That's a 40% drop.
That is definitely significant. And
that's something.
Again, I have no explanation. About 30% of our suicides leave a note. So
do they? Are they self-inflicted gunshots? Are they hangings?
Of course, gunshot is the most common.
Yeah.
Hanging comes in second.
Does it? Yeah.
And then we have drugs.
I was going to say, how do you make the determination of what is a suicide overdose and a regular overdose?
Well, if we don't find evidence that someone intended to end their own life, we take the high road and rule it an accident.
Okay. Yeah.
And we don't get many drug suicides.
Right.
Very few.
The whole sleeping pills thing.
Right. Yeah. Those pretty much gone. And I think the medical community has done very well at limiting how much of that goes out.
Okay.
We don't see OxyContin anymore. We don't see any of those high-powered drugs from before. And if you go to an emergency room, they'll give you 2
You're right.
or 3 and tell you
Instead
to go
of
talk to
giving
your
you
own
the
doctor.
hydrocodone.
So it...
I think you were telling me about Narcan, and it doesn't work on the fentanyl, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Because fentanyl is a synthetic.
Right. Narcan only works with naturally occurring opiates, of which is heroin, cocaine, codeine, and you smoke.
Like crack or?
No. It's, they did in China. I just went blank there.
Yeah.
But those are the only things that the Narcan works on. And it's incredible when it works to see it because it happens right now. But the fentanyl, if you have fentanyl, there's no coming back.
That is a misnomer for sure. The so we've seen basically overall deaths, your cases have dropped, and you've seen suicide cases dropped. And I want to take a break before we get into the deep numbers here, but you don't. There's like no. When we were seeing it increase, we saw definite signs of there's obviously we had a fentanyl problem. We obviously had a meth problem. We obviously had a gun. We had gun violence problem there. What in the middle teens or something like that?
Yeah, no, we saw some gun business last year, but it's dropped off considerably.
Wow.
Again, I have very little. A lot of the gun involved incidents don't end in death, so consequently, we don't get involved.
You're not involved in that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, you might have a kid maimed for the rest of their lives, but
they don't
wouldn't
come
affect
from me.
the coroner there. Let's not bury the lead any longer, Lyell. You're saying that overall, especially because we really are concerned about drug deaths here in Erie,
right?
And drug deaths are down.
Yeah, way down. Wow.
Down.
I am so glad to say that. I don't get to say happy things very often.
No, you don't.
But right now it was significant. A significant drop.
Okay, what is the number one killer though when it comes to drugs and alcohol?
It's still fentanyl.
Fentanyl
is still number one. We haven't seen any heroin in about 3 years. Methamphetamine has kind of taken over from.
How do you die from meth?
All of these drugs paralyze the respiratory centers of the brain.
Okay.
And that's what kills with fentanyl. You forget how to breathe, and it dies. And when they were injecting it literally kills before you can take the needle out.
Unreal.
That fast.
It's like you're turning your brain off of its basic functioning.
Right. Yeah. The cerebellum just freezes, and
that somehow
don't breathe anymore.
People get a high from that. This was what's shocking to me is that when it's not fatal, what's the impact?
Yeah, I don't know. I've talked to people that have actually taken fentanyl, and survived, and they said it's the ultimate high.
Wow.
And that's what they were looking for.
And fentanyl has been used in a therapeutic manner. I mean, you have orthopedic surgery. Sometimes that's what they give you, right?
They gave me that for open heart surgery.
Did they really?
Years ago, and it's very, very good. It's a good drug when used properly. But I don't know where they got the idea of starting to sell it on the streets.
Yeah.
But
So how many people died overall of a drug overdose? Or
in 2023, we had 122 drug deaths in Erie County. Last year we had 72, which is almost half. That is,
drop.
we would expect little variations here and
Right.
there. That's not a variation. That's a message, and we're just delighted about that. Quite honestly,
It makes us want to talk to the FBI or talk to the city police and say, okay, are we just pulling that much of the volume off of the streets?
obviously, it's got to be going somewhere.
Yeah.
And but that, when I saw the numbers, I even ran them the second time because I didn't believe
Wow.
it had worked that way. But that's significant plus.
Yeah. Yeah. You have? Did you dig into ages yet, or is that later in your report?
Yeah, I'm not able to do
Yeah.
my final numbers until I
'Cause-
get all of my cases finished.
But you in the past have said that you've had fentanyl deaths from teenagers into people in their 70s and 80s, right?
2023, our age range for drug deaths in Erie County was 15 years old to 80.
Unreal.
So, and I always kind of get a kick when I overhear people. They'll look at the paper and obituary, and there'll be someone young in there, and they automatically think it's a drug death. And I can tell you that the by and large, most of these younger people dying are due to strokes and cardiac issues, and they're natural deaths. They had nothing to do with drugs, but they just automatically
again,
think.
it's not your role to investigate that.
No, not.
But it makes me just for not curiosity, but just for out of concern. If young people are having strokes and cardiac deaths, how the heck is that happening?
Well, I think if you talk to, and I actually had spent a bunch of time with a cardiovascular surgeon, and they said they have to be very careful with what they say publicly.
Yeah.
But they said young people now, like teenagers, are third-generation McDonald's eaters, and they're actually seeing cardiovascular changes and coronary artery disease in people like 12, 14, 16, because it's been that way since they were born. And it's starting to show now because it's cumulative. And so you see these...
So nutritional based.
Yes. That's what they're saying. And we've seen a number of high school students, they were out practicing football, and they just drop over, and that's generally what it is. It's a it's a cardiovascular thing, and there's certain cases where that's also hereditary.
Okay, sure.
So it's not necessarily.
I mean, there's that Buffalo Bills player,
Right,
that everybody was concerned about in questioning what that could have been all about, right? And you coaches do get trained for sudden cardiac arrest,
right.
And how to mitigate that. I mean, that could happen on a track,
Absolutely.
a field thing. But
And you run into that in gyms with older people.
right,
But age doesn't. Death is an equal opportunity employer. It doesn't matter how old you are, and like I said, it's not unusual for teenagers and college age people to suddenly die from undiagnosed cardiac, hypertension, all kinds of things. The obesity problem is part of that.
yeah.
Because that leads to hypertension, which usually leads to a stroke.
Yeah, that's all connected.
Yes, it's all.
Those metabolic ailments. It's so fascinating to talk to you, Coroner. It leads me to question, when you encounter, let's say, a car accident or something like that, and it makes me wonder how many car accidents are based from some kind of a stroke event or a heart attack or thing, where you're going in investigating a car accident, you've got a dead driver.
Right.
Like, how do you figure that one out?
Well, state law requires anybody for us to do toxicology on the operator.
Okay.
And if we don't, sometimes if they're ejected, which many of our motor vehicle deaths are, because they're not wearing their belts, then we do whatever victims are there.
And so you, first off, you're saying that the people that usually die from a motor vehicle accident are not belted first off.
Right. That the ejection is a really big issue in motor vehicle accidents, especially when the weather's good, because you're driving with the windows down, and especially in rollovers where someone is partially ejected and the car rolls over them. It's very, but we test everybody.
Yeah.
And we can tell right away whether or not, and in the absence of drugs and alcohol, now we have to, we generally go back to the family doctor.
Okay.
So, well, they were hypertensive, they were this, they were that.
There's no hormone that you can test that
No.
would shoot out from a stroke or an MI.
If they're still alive, there's testing.
Okay.
The minute you die, that goes away. So we have to just go with our gut feelings and the evidence that we're able to turn out.
Wow. And do sometimes, when you have that kind of case, is it sometimes undetermined?
Yes. Yeah, we had actually 9 undetermined deaths last year, and those are, again, cases that despite everything that we do, we can't rule by a medical or scientific certainty. And some of them are even autopsies, and we do it all. And it was just not enough of any one thing to be able to say that this is why the death occurred. We run into that with infants.
Okay.
That crib death, SIDS.
Yeah.
But because what that is, that's called a diagnosis of exclusion.
Right.
We autopsy the child, do the toxicology, and in the absence of everything, then it becomes SIDS.
From baggage claim to pajamas in 10 minutes. Erie International Airport. Fly with ERI.com.
Fly Erie International Airport to Charlotte on American Airlines, your nonstop gateway to the world. Also, we have Breeze Airways flying nonstop to Orlando and Tampa, Florida. A great low-cost carrier providing excellent service to the regional community. Fly Erie International for your travel needs.
Fly with ERI.com.
All year round, Frontier Home Products and Design has what you need to make your home comfortable and beautiful. Relax on a new timber tech deck designed by Frontier's experts. A new fireplace from Frontier Home Products Fireplace Gallery adds warmth and serenity to any home. Beauty and versatility at Frontier Home Products and Design Center, 4213 Peachtree East 5th next to the Bayfront Highway.
Frontier Home Products and Design Center. Discover a new frontier.
PA contractor number PA039007.
Every time you come on, Coroner Cook, we learn so much, and it and again, in your defense, there's all these crazy TV shows on CSI or whatever that mess you up probably quite a bit. Because everybody thinks they're forensic examiners.
Actually, I hear about that from courts.
Oh, yeah?
Because the juries come in and they think that they know all this. What about DNA? What about this? What about that? I don't necessarily deal with that. Occasionally, we'll get families that will demand they want an autopsy and they want DNA and they want this and they want that. Well, if our autopsies are not by demand or request. They're only done for the purposes of prosecution. And
are you the sole determiner of that? Okay.
100%.
So the prosecutor can't even say we need an autopsy.
No.
Okay.
Now if they have a reason and they want to talk to me, that's fine. But I'm the only one that can do that. The DA can't order it. Prosecutors can't. Nobody.
On a gunshot homicide, is that pretty typical that you would try to find entry and exit wounds and so on?
Absolutely. We have to autopsy every homicide.
Okay.
Because you can't take it to court without it. And one of the things we do is, of course, we try to recover the bullet or the bullet fragments, and then it'll be up to the pathologist to determine angles and what organs were hit, that sort of thing. So it ends up being gunshot wound to the chest, without going into details that it pierced both lungs and the heart and the vena cava and all these other things. But you can only take it into court with a full autopsy to prove, which has happened many years in the past, where there's been a car accident. Clearly, the person died of the injuries, and they said, well, he had a heart attack before the...
Right. Yeah.
So the only way you can prove that didn't happen was by autopsy. So for when I first got into this, we were required to autopsy motor vehicle deaths, and finally they got away from that.
Okay.
Because it's really kind of silly when you think about it. But if it's something that we think needs it, we do it. There is absolutely no question about it.
It's so interesting to me when you have a situation where maybe somebody succumbs in a fire. Oftentimes, though, you might have to investigate further of that body to see whether there was foul play, right? I mean, I'm thinking about the bomber in Vegas over the weekend with the Cybertruck. He self-inflicted gunshot wound, but then the whole truck exploded, right?
I guess. I
that's the story, and but that wasn't originally what we didn't know that until later on when the investigation had found that out, right?
And we test every fire death with toxicology because, believe it or not, as badly as a body can be burned, generally the internal organs are still okay, and so we draw blood and we submit it. We're looking for drugs and alcohol naturally. But what we're really looking for is carboxyhemoglobin, which is the drug from inhaling carbon monoxide. And 40%, 30 to 40% is lethal.
Okay.
So if there's no no carboxyhemoglobin in the blood that we take, we know that the person was dead before the fire started. Now that goes into homicide.
Wow.
So... it's a matter of just going from point A to B to C.
Yeah. Did we have a lot of people who succumbed by fire or smoke inhalation?
No, not really. Let's see.
I guess, why don't you run down some of the accidental deaths that you're showing there? Because we did talk about the drug deaths already.
Yeah, the accidentals, of course, we have blunt force, which is generally due to a fall.
Okay.
Down the steps, more often than not. We had 4 drownings. We actually had 25 accidental gunshot wounds.
Okay.
And
what are you calling an accident? I mean, it's like the rifle goes off or something?
It's generally hunters or someone playing with a handgun. It's all over the place.
Wow.
And keep in mind that some of these cases are not technically Erie County.
Okay.
They're flown in here, but coroner's jurisdiction is based on the county of death without regard for where the injury occurred.
That makes a lot of sense.
So consequently, the helicopters just flying these people in hourly.
Because we have the big trauma.
The trauma center.
Yeah.
So if they die in Erie County, it's an Erie County case. Just the same way that for children, if they survive whatever the issue is, they're generally sent to Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh.
Sure.
And if they die down there, now it's an Allegheny County case. We're completely out of it, and that works out very well. We had 6 pedestrians. We had 3 train deaths.
Yeah.
Which are always very unfortunate.
Absolutely.
Especially one in particular. The motor vehicle deaths, we went up 1 on motorcycles from 12 to 13. Still 25% were without helmets.
Oh, is that right?
Right, because they're still not required.
Yeah.
And 4 had alcohol on board, 4 had drugs on board. Motor vehicle deaths, we went from 18 to 23. We went up 5.
No, that's quite a bit, actually.
It is, but it's
It's probably within a realm.
Within a realm, I think.
Is there, again, I don't know how much of a studier of history you are, but it seems like when I read the old newspapers, people died from car accidents all the time.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, because those things were just like big beasts.
Tanks.
Yes.
Well, I've said a number of times that the coroners, and the whole idea of these statistics is that eventually they end up in places that they use our numbers to make changes to things. One of them is the glass, automotive glass.
Okay, yeah.
One of them is, it used to be, and I had an old Packard hearse, actually, but the steering wheel was a pipe that went down to the tie rods. So when you got, and there was no seat belts or anything, so if you hit anything head on, you ended up with a lacerated aorta because...
Oh, my gosh.
And now they have the breakaway steering wheels, they have airbags, all these things. One of the big things is magnetic catches on refrigerators and freezers.
Just to keep the door closed.
Early on in my career, longer than I want to talk, it seemed like every year we would have at least one case where Grandma would go down to the basement to the chest freezer to get the turkey out for Thanksgiving, and she'd have to reach way down to get it, and she'd fall in, and the thing would close, and there's no way out because it was a mechanical
clutch. Yeah,
and 3 children in Detroit many years ago were playing, and there was an old refrigerator.
Okay.
And they got inside, they were playing hide and go seek and couldn't get out, and it killed all of them. So based on that, surprisingly, the Congress passed a law that you're not allowed to have those, and you can't sell anything in the United States that doesn't have magnetic catches on both freezers, walk-in freezers like at churches,
right?
And stores, and also the refrigerators at home.
My goodness.
And but over the years, and of course.
What about tip overs? That was always a concern.
Oh yeah.
Of like chests of drawers or any kind of shelving. Have you run into that in recent years?
Just a couple times.
Yeah.
Very, very little. Most people are well enough schooled that they'll put in an eye bolt.
Mm-hmm.
Or
right into the wall or into the stud to hold it.
And back years ago when I was in the lumber business, I remember people buying these big cabinets, and they would come in and we would cut wedges, and they'd put it under this to kind of mechanically tip it back against the wall.
Oh, interesting.
Because they never thought of putting an eye bolt in a chain or anything. So over the years, people have gotten a lot smarter because of how their neighbors died.
Wow.
And that's why I'm here.
Well, and I remember too. Again, talking about young babies and toddlers, they got rid of the whole concept of a walker. Mm-hmm. I mean, now you have saucers,
right?
But they don't move. The baby can bounce in there.
Pack and plays and stuff like that. And they now tell you that you don't put anything in the crib.
Right.
As far as stuffed animals and blankets and everything.
They have the sleep sacks. My babies have the sleep sacks. And they just swaddle.
And when I was growing up, L. Hopkins in Lake City was one of the top manufacturers of cribs and infant potty chairs and things like that. And it used to be that, of course, they'd design a crib, and they'd put a metal spring in it with a thin mattress on it. Well, what they found out is if the baby got into one corner, that would flip up. They would drop down, and then it would close on their neck. And again, the federal government stopped that.
Mm-hmm.
We actually are one of the biggest causes of death for children is sleeping with co-sleeping.
Right, when they jump in with the folks.
Almost all.
And they usually rolled, like the parent will roll over?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's a suffocation. And and apparently the hospitals will not allow a new mother to leave until she has been schooled in that.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And I mean, we've had a couple babies that died during nursing. You know, where the parents have been up for 2 days, and I understand why you fall asleep, and so there's all kinds of things that we can end up with our undoing. And
so in some regards, the data that the coroner generates can extend life,
right,
as it's processed on a macro level.
The federal government puts out a printing every year, which goes back about 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the Morbidity and Mortality Report. And if you want to know how many people in Montana died from dog bites, this is the book for you. I mean, literally,
wow.
every conceivable type of death by state and locality.
I was going to say, you probably don't deal with too many, deadly snake bites like you might in Arizona or something like that.
No, it's a function of where you live.
Yeah.
We don't have alligators here, crocodile.
That's true.
Snakes. Once in a while, there was one of my neighbors actually brought up a load of cherry wood from Kane, Pennsylvania, which is the black cherry capital of the United States. And they were going to use it. Well, it turns out there were nests of rattlesnakes
inside the wood.
Inside the wood. Fortunately, they came up here and they die immediately because they can't take our weather.
Okay, that's.
But
good news.
that was a bit of an issue.
Oh my word! What we do have is the deer hits, and you actually have several accidental deaths from deer hits.
Oh,
right?
yes. And matter of fact, I had one quite a few years ago, where they bought a brand new Cadillac, husband and wife, and they went for a drive on Sunday to try out the new car. And there was an area where the ground was built up on both sides of the road. It was like an earth bridge. A deer came off of there and went through the windshield and kicked the woman to death. And
that's just awful.
Yeah. I mean, I could tell you, I could go on for hours.
Right.
And that's just one of those. It's just an odd case.
Do you get any sense from the data as you read it? Obviously, we could all say don't do drugs.
Right.
I mean, that is because that is the number one killer. But is there other things to learn for people to maybe extend their life? I mean, other than freak accidents or whatever, or probably that violent person you might need to get them out of your life,
Well,
I mean, right?
We run into that, too.
I mean, you have a lot of domestic homicides, right?
Yes. No, not a lot, but we have our share of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I think one of the things I would tell people is you have to be much more careful as a pedestrian.
We did have quite a few pedestrian deaths, didn't
and I can tell you, just in front of the courthouse, it's like nobody can cross the street without having their face buried in a phone. And they're all wearing earbuds or headphones, and they couldn't care less. They never learned to look both ways like we had to back in the 50s and 60s.
Wow.
And they just arbitrarily walk, and you see that right here on State Street.
Yeah.
And just everywhere. I would say that would be something you have to protect yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Don't expect anyone to do the protection for you.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the people in the car, they're texting and they're not paying attention. So you got two people not paying attention, and then I have to go to work.
Last couple minutes with the Coroner Lyell Cook. Where, as you read the trades, where is AI playing a role in your business?
I can't say that at all.
Nothing. Nobody's talking about it yet.
No. Of course, we don't talk very much between
right.
But as of right now,
I'm surprised that there wasn't, like, when you go to the Pennsylvania meeting or whatever, that they're not having a seminar about this stuff.
Well, they probably will. Coming this year.
That's probably true. Yeah.
But no, we really haven't heard anything. It's we're still.
Are your records all electronic now? I mean,
yes.
and all that's okay.
Yeah,
so.
we have everything, and we even do our photographs. We photograph during the autopsies, and those go into the computer. We don't take any at the scenes. That's the police job.
Okay.
And that works out really well. I think probably, in retrospect, the one thing that bothers me the most are the amount of unclaimed bodies we have.
Really?
And
yeah, every once in a while you'll put out a press release or something saying any relatives, because you can
every one of them. Yeah,
you can identify the people.
Oh, we know who they are. It's no question, but somebody has to come forward and take financial responsibility for the disposition. And right now, I had 24 just last year. Now,
you had 24 unclaimed bodies.
Yes, sir. And the law requires us to offer them to the medical school first, but they only will accept certain ones. If they're veterans, the honorably discharged veterans, they're sent to the National Cemetery of the Alleghenies down in Bridgeville. Otherwise, every other year on 9/11, which is coming up this year, at 11 o'clock, we have a scattering ceremony, which is open to the public out at Pleasant Ridge.
Is that the old Paupers Cemetery?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And we have three clergy. VFW will do the gun salute, and then we have volunteers that will scatter the ashes out there. The names go out on a wall. If you have a chance to go out, I would heartily recommend it, because I can tell you that we are the only county in Pennsylvania that handles their unclaimed like that.
Wow.
With any kind of dignity.
Yeah.
And I'm not pointing fingers at my colleagues, but that's what we do, and Erie should be very proud of that.
For those that are estranged from the deceased, there's not a lot of incentive to claim them, is there?
No, there is.
I mean, you hate to say it that way.
Yeah, and three-fifths of our unclaimed families or bodies have family right here in Erie, and they just walk away from it.
They walk away. Wow.
And I've just never understood it, but I am proud that we're taking care of these people
in their final,
like we should,
in their finality. Wow.
And the funeral homes and everybody has been very good about that. So
well, we appreciate you coming in and sharing your expertise, and again, it's extremely fascinating and humbling. And I got to tell you, I mean, every death is a loss, but I'm very thankful that we're seeing our drug-related deaths go down.
Oh, I am too. There was something that we kind of secretly prayed for.
Yes.
It's so unfortunate.
Because it's such a scourge.
And until you have to knock on someone's door and tell them that their 14-year-old isn't coming home, and they don't teach you how to do that. You have to learn it.
Right.
But I have to do a lot of death notifications, different, depending on what it is, but especially for something that is so unnecessary. And and I feel with them, I really do. But I do what I have to do, and that's what we do. We tell them, your daughter or your son isn't coming home tonight or ever. And so I hope that as we move on, that people will continue to become smarter.
Yeah.
And because I get paid either way.
Yes. Well, and we're glad that someone who's so competent and sensitive is at the helm. Thank you, Erie County Coroner Lyell Cook. Thank you so much, sir.
Joel, it's a pleasure. Always enjoy coming over here.
You've been listening to The Joel Natalie Show, Erie, Pennsylvania's daily podcast from TalkErie.com. Subscribe to our show on your favorite podcatcher and get involved by emailing joel@TalkErie.com.